Good afternoon, and I'm Professor Piya Mahtaney. The question that we've often heard, what's happening? Trying to lend clarity about what's happening in this world from an economic perspective, I start with my talk on transformation. The topic of the TED Talk, Transformation Reimagined, for me, it really strikes a chord because I've asked the question about what should be done to expedite economic transformation from a developmental perspective. And the three aspects of transformation that I'll be focused on: one, I'm trying to understand what transformation means; two, skill development; and three, sustainable development. The topics are interconnected, but in order to lend clarity, I will try to discuss them distinctly and shed some insight, shed some thought on what lies ahead. One of the reasons that I made my area of research, development strategy and globalization, in the larger context of sustainable development, has been to find out how trillions of dollars of wealth that is generated get to a point where it results in economic development. Why am I saying this? Because, over the last, I would say, 3.5 decades, when you all weren't born, at that point in time, when I was a student, I would see, a lot of hype about, this country growing at an 8% growth rate, some country growing at a 10% growth rate. And I would say, but, human development indicators haven't changed considerably. And that kind of thought provoked me to pursue the course that I've pursued. 15 minutes or 17 minutes to speak about transformation, I don't think that's possible, even if you're talking about transformation of single nation. But 15 minutes is enough for me to communicate to you some important aspects of transformation that will and are having a profound impact on our lives. What has started to have a profound impact on our lives? Geopolitical change, dramatic advances in technology, and the fact that India is going to play an increasingly important role in the world. So let me just start by talking about development. It's interesting that businesses, large scale and small scale, when they are taking a decision, they think about so many facets. They think about so many aspects. It's not just about one department or one aspect, but they think across dimensions. But that line of thinking, that approach has not been scaled up. What I'm trying to say is that for the last 3.5 decades, the world has had a mega business strategy. Great. And this has guided business strategies, particularly in larger companies, all over the world, with some differences, some modifications, for about 3.5 decades. But the world has conspicuously and evidently lacked a development paradigm. So, over 3.5 decades, you've had countries growing, you've had economic growth rates fall, but not much improvement in the development indicators, not much improvement in the state of human well-being, not much improvement or increase in the employment opportunities in countries which are labor abundant, in countries which are developing, in underdeveloped countries. Who's to blame? All of us, in a way. So we lack a development paradigm. In 2007, my second book, India, China and Globalization, one of the main takeaways or one of the main insights that I've explained in that book is the evolution of a framework for a development paradigm, or should I say a sustainable development paradigm, which, this is the book, India, China and Globalization, the development paradigm, where I had 3 constituents. This development paradigm, I defined 3 main building blocks for development. The first, as you can see, is PEP growth. What is PEP growth? Sounds good? Well, It's the kind of growth that will result in development. PEP, as in pro, E, environment, P, people, P, the last P, prosperity. You can also call it that growth rate, that increase in growth rate that will result in development. What this essentially means is that growth, if it's based on this, if it's based on environmental consciousness, if it's based on improving human well-being, if it's based on increasing incomes across the board, that will result in development. Because empirical evidence has demonstrated that the nature of growth, the basis of growth, determines its outcomes. So you can have a 10% growth rate, but if it's jobless or almost jobless, that cannot be called as a growth rate that will contribute to development. The next, as you can see, the next constituent is called EEM. What is EEM? Effective economic management. Creating the incentive mechanisms, creating an investment framework that will enable an expansion of productive investment where it's required the most. So towards all the 17 sustainable development targets, creating a framework that will ensure enough investment into all this. It hasn't happened. Much rhetoric, much talk, it hasn't happened. And in fact, we can say that sustainability, the lack of sustainability or sustainability requires EEM. The lack of sustainability is the result of weaknesses in EEM. The third constituent, economic reform. Now, this is the most difficult constituent because it's about the political system. It's about institutional reform. It's about changes that take time. It's about increasing levels of efficiency in governance. It's about a lot of variables, but the pressure point on that will trigger a quicker pace of economic reform is that we are confronted with the challenge of becoming more sustainable, and the deadline is 2030. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from here takes us to the next aspect, skill development. Technological advances, AI, fair amount said about it, robotics, threaten jobs. There has already been some disruptive impact of AI on jobs, but again, it's not about blaming technology. It's about using technology as a tool to complement employment creation, to help overcoming constraints in infrastructure, and there are a number of instances at the ground level where that is being done. The creation of a development paradigm requires also that skilling is done and skilling is done from pre-primary levels of education to the postdoctoral level. It's a continuous process that doesn't begin after graduation or after higher secondary school. The skills that need to be emphasized on. The first skill is social intelligence. This is, I'm just giving you insights of a number of empirical studies that I've gone through and analyzed. So the first skill set is social intelligence. The second skill set is emotional intelligence, the two connected. The third skill set is the manipulative intelligence. And here manipulative is not to mean, it's not a derogatory meaning, it's the ability to adapt. The next step from here would be to use AI as a complement, use AI to help us create the skills, create the context where we have the skills required to create those employment opportunities. Now, I come to the third aspect of my talk, which is actually looking at sustainable development. Sustainable development, I don't need to say much about it, except that the poorest nations are completely constrained of financial assistance, in spite of there being no shortage of funds for the purpose at the global level. And the way to go from this is, as I said, AI needs to be an enabler, which it would be, enabler of opportunity creation, which it would be if we create the context for it to be. I see steps in the direction, but we have a long way to go. And sustainable development is the source of the tremendous opportunity creation and employment creation. And we need to harness that potential. Without harnessing sustainable development, you're not going to meet the targets of development. Notably, each sustainable development target is in itself a source of opportunity creation. And in each, we can use AI to help overcome constraints without job losses. So let me conclude with a little couplet. So, US elections have recently concluded. Donald Trump is the US president, and y'all would have heard him say, drill, baby, drill. And I say for India and for many regions of the world, the theme should be skill India skill if you want to give the economy a thrill. Thank you.